Welcome back to
well
session
looked
2.
after here, thank you.
You can hear okay back there, Tash?
Absolutely.
Alright, so we've done a recap on Samadhi, and we're going to do that practice in the first half hour tomorrow morning.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
Yep.
That.
And now I want to talk about insight. So why insight? And I have already really touched on this so insight, I guess first of all, insight is a fairly broad term, and in some respects insight is any kind of epiphany. You could have an insight about, your garden and how to, certain plants. But in this philosophy, in Buddhist philosophy that we're sort of studying, the insight really means a specific type of insight. Okay? And another word for it is emptiness. You probably will have heard of emptiness lots of times, and we'll be talking about the emptiness of this and the emptiness of that. So really the insight that we're talking in is into the emptiness of phenomena, all phenomena, especially self. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about insight. Now, it's in knowing the truth, according to various traditions, Advaita and Hinduism and Buddhism, it sets us free. So it is the vehicle to awakening. But insight also can be used as a tool in your meditation. So as we described before, we can use insight to help us cope with distractions as well. And in fact, the more insight you have, it is the strongest of all antidotes if used properly and if you have already some deepening into insight. So when we have a distressing thought arise, we can try to ignore it, we can try to put it down, we can then try to use metta on it, loving kindness, we can reframe it, we can do various techniques, like we can do submodality shifts in NLP and things like that. All of those are effective. This insight practice is the most effective if done properly. It can completely obliterate a distraction, very, very in seconds, if you can just penetrate it and see it correctly. So it's a very, very powerful antidote, and it's also the key to liberation. In fact, it's the only tool to achieve liberation. There is no other tool. According to many, many saints, they say if you want to be awakened, you have to understand insight. It's the only tool to awaken the mind. So it can be used as a tool within Samadhi. So when you're having a problem, you can use it as a tool to get rid of distraction and go back to Samadhi, or you can use it as a meditation in its own right. Yeah? Alright, so we're going to have a real brief introduction of emptiness, and I want to sort of talk about some very, very obvious examples first, and then we're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper as the weekend progresses. And one of the sort of, I think, most obvious examples is in a border between South Australia and Victoria. When you're flying across from, Victoria and South Australia, clearly you've come from Victoria and you come to South Australia, but where is the border? You don't see anything, do you? Up in the air there was nothing to say suddenly, I'm in South Australia now. And if you go onto the ground, yes, along the roadway there's a sign, but if you sort of go out into the bush a bit, you'll see there's just bushland, and there's no difference between South Australia and Victoria. So it's empty of being a real thing. A border is empty of being a real thing. It's purely a fictional idea in someone's mind. Yeah? And yet, look at what problems borders create. You know, look at the Gaza Strip and the war in Ukraine. You know, Putin desperately wants to, you know, increase his borders because somehow he's conflated this idea of if you can draw a line on a map, no matter how many people you kill, if I draw that bigger, I'll have done something good for Mother Russia. And it's all in people's minds. You know, the people on the ground really don't care. Quite frankly, they just want peace. They don't actually really care whether they're in Russia or Ukraine, to be honest. A lot of times. So this fiction of mind that is not real causes many, many problems. So that's a really good example of something which is we take as real. Their borders are real. Of course they're real, but in fact they're not real, are they? They're fictitious. You know, they're in people's minds. Next one is a movie. We can look at a movie and we can start getting into the movie and react as if it is real. We get emotional about this character and this character and this character. But it's completely fake. They're actors. Yeah? So we can have these reactions as if they're real, but they are empty of inherent existence. The story in the movie is empty of being a real story. It's not real. It's made up in someone's mind, you know, and put into a book, and then they've taken the book and they've turned it into movie form, and they've altered the book to make it more suitable for TV. You know, and we get hooked in and we see that. So these are obvious examples, but we're going to actually see that eventually it's the same for glasses and me and you and everything. Everything is empty of this reality. Yeah. So that's a movie. Another example is social conventions. As I said earlier, there's a social convention in Asia that you do not ever point your feet at people. It's really, really rude. But, you know, Deb doesn't have that same social convention. And so it's not real. It's just in someone's head. And we use please and thank you. And we have certain table manners, which if we use over in Asia, they'd laugh at us. You know, they have different table manners. But, you know, we do stuff here and we think they're silly, these manners that they have over there. But if we do them over there, they're highly offended. And so you have to be careful. But all of that is fictional. So all social conventions are fictional. When I do most retreats, I have to think about whether we do this on our retreat, I have silence in the morning. And I say to people, okay, you're not allowed to talk to each other. You've got to remain in silence. And people, well, I don't think I can do that. I said, not only that, you're not allowed to look at each other. So you just don't look at each other, you know? And people feel really weird because you've taken away a very unconscious social convention. Yeah? And, you know, don't bother helping someone at the, you know, let them get their own breakfast. Don't give them, you know, and people find it just completely confronting because to them, social conventions are real. They're things that you do, but they're all in the mind, okay? They're all in the mind. They happen to be in the minds of many people, and so we get reinforced that they must be real because everyone seems to be doing them, but they're not real. Social conventions are empty of being real. The next example, we're getting a little bit more sort of real, is that chair is empty of being a chair. Yeah, we say, okay, you're sitting in a chair. And the example is, if you were to put the chair on the fire and it would start burning, eventually it would turn to ash. And ash is not a chair, is it? Ash is clearly not a chair. So when does chair become not chair? Is it when it just starts to get singed? Well, if it's blackened, you know, take it out of the fire, it still say it's a chair, even though it's a bit blackened. Put it back on the fire a bit more. Maybe if one of the legs starts to get burnt and it's a little bit shorter, is it not a chair, or is it still a chair? You know, if two of the legs got burned, you would say it's not really a chair because it's like leaning on one side. So if they're half burned, where's that crossover between chair and not chair? Now, if you can't find the crossover, then is the chair really a chair in the first place? Yeah? So you start to see that it's getting really, really subtle. Yeah? The other example that Rob the Bayer goes on about is if you had 3 planks of wood. You know, they're just 3 planks of wood. But if you started to arrange them in a certain way, you could make a letter Z or a letter A, for example. And looking at it at a certain angle with all the pieces of wood at a certain angle, you go, that's a letter A. Now the letter A is a sort of a real thing to us. We know what the letter A is. But those planks of wood were just pieces of wood before they gradually, and at some point, they just got into the right position where you go, oh, it's a letter A. And before that, you had no idea what it was, type of thing. Yeah? So the letter A is not really real. Yeah? It's just made up of smaller little lines. Yeah? It's only conventionally real. Make sense, Robin?
No. No, that doesn't. It's not real. When it became an A.
We made the story up that A means that shape means an A, but it's not an A. It's just 3 lines. But we created a story saying that shape is an A, and then it makes that sound. There's all those things to do with A. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So suddenly a conception comes in our mind that there is an A, but there wasn't an A before. It just suddenly comes in our mind, but nothing has really happened out there. Nothing out there has really happened.
So say if a natural Japanese person saw that shape, they wouldn't think it was an A because they wouldn't know what an A is.
So in their minds, there's 3 planks of wood. All right. So these are sort of slightly easier examples. Another good example, which I really quite like, is let's say I had an apple, nice shiny apple, tastes good. I know that it's an apple. Okay. Now I have a certain perception of an apple. It's made up of a colour. It's got a certain texture. I know it's an apple. Now, if there was another creature, like a bee, for example, we're not talking a Japanese person, we're talking a bee. Apparently bees see in ultraviolet, yeah? And they have multifaceted eyes. So what they would perceive over there would be something completely different to what we would see. Yeah? It would be, they would have different light coming in, and it would be processed differently by their eyes, and they would see it as completely different. And to them it's meaningless because bees are really mostly only interested in flowers, so they sort of wouldn't recognize it at all. Now, if we had a dog also, now a dog has much more of an olfactory sense. So it just sees in black and white, its vision is not very good, but it would have a huge signature of smell about this thing. So there are 3 consciousnesses all seeing completely different things over here. One sees a whole lot of smell, another sees a red apple, another one sees a very boring, bland object in ultraviolet, doesn't really glow much like flowers. If you see flowers in ultraviolet, they really glow. So which one is correct? Which one is the correct perception? What is an apple?
Nothing.
It's undefinable, isn't it? We can define it through our perception, but just because we define it a certain way doesn't make that apple the way that we define it. You know, because it could quite easily be defined as well. It has hardly any signature at all. It has, you know, this funny pixelated ultraviolet print, and no one's as well. It doesn't look like much, but all I know is how it smells. Completely different. You can't say. So what does an apple really look like? What's this trick? There is no, is there? So it's empty. It's empty of any characteristics.
Yeah.
It's completely empty of characteristics. The characteristics only depend on the consciousness that is viewing it. Like that, everything around here is completely empty of all characteristics. Okay? Make sense? How you going, Tash? All good?
Yeah, following.
So these are some examples to just get us started on this path down to emptiness. So even that, just thinking about that, kind of blows your mind a bit.
It does. It's pretty. Like I understand the concept, but then understanding it is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
No, I don't really understand it.
But are we ever supposed to? Are we ever supposed to really understand it?
Well, no. See, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is ultimately this has to be a thing that is intuitive rather than a conceptual idea of it.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we can still use conception to get to a point where we can sort of make an intuitive leap, so we can sort of feel into it, so to speak. Yeah. Again, and the thing is, like, if you had an argument with the grocer and said, this red apple is not as good as this green apple, I'm not paying as much for that red apple as that green apple is good. So it's a problem. But then if suddenly you realise there's no apple there, then suddenly there's no basis for there to be a problem. Yeah? And so that's why it's so powerful at getting rid of all hindrances. Because there's just no basis for problems to exist. They can't exist if you can see from the point of view of emptiness. All right. So now,
would that resolve a whole lot of arguments that partners would have, that you could just say, drop it
of course,
in your head.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
You could avoid.
not only arguments with others, but any kind of argument within your own mind as well.
Absolutely.
Drop everything. And so the thinking mind has no place to abide, because everything is completely empty. And so you go completely into a state of awareness, and you actually even go beyond awareness. Because awareness turns out to be empty as well. Even though for the next 3 or 4 months I'm going to be drilling into you, go into awareness. But ultimately there is no such thing as awareness. So anyway.
We'll be back in 5
So you can see this is the tempo of the retreat. So that's what you've got yourself in for.
We have nothing left to talk about, Sue.
Nothing.
That's me, the way I'm feeling.
All right. So
An emptiness party.
yeah. So generally, the traditions really talk about 2 types of realization of emptiness. The first is emptiness of self, And then the second is emptiness of phenomena, which is emptiness of everything. Now, it is possible to kind of move your mind to a point where you realize emptiness of self, but you still believe in a real world. You still believe in a real world. If you see emptiness of phenomena, then a self is a phenomena. So that means you transcend everything all in one go. But there is this idea of moving sort of in stages where you see emptiness of self and emptiness of phenomena. And the thing is, if you see emptiness of self, that is enough to, create nibbana. So you can move into nibbana just by seeing emptiness of self. So it is one that we concentrate on in a way the most. We will be going into this emptiness of self in many, many different ways, because that's the thing that is actually very liberating. And then going beyond that is emptiness of phenomena, which is even deeper, but it's enough to just see emptiness of self, and you can actually awaken the mind that way. So there's two types of emptinesses, and there are also two approaches to emptiness. And again, we have to remember that this is something the conceptual mind can't think itself into. It has to be an intuitive leap. So we need to sink into this, and there are two approaches. The first is to define the object to be negated. They call it defining the object to be negated, which a lot of times will be the self. Now, it might be this water bottle or whatever, just an object. But with the one with the self, he said, how do I know that I exist? Yeah, I know I exist. Okay, how do I know I exist? Well, I'm the body. I can see a body, I can feel a body. And then what we do is we search for any reality in the body. And eventually we come to see there's no reality in the body. But then you go, well, all right, I agree with you, I'm not the body, but I am the mind. I'm the thinker. I'm the thinking that thinks there's a body. Even though there's no body, I think that there's a body. So then you go into mind and you search for the object to be negated, and eventually you use your rational reasoning to realize actually it's impossible for a mind to exist. It can't exist. And a body can't exist. And so you search long and hard for the thing that you believe exists, and eventually you come to the conclusions. No logical path of reasoning actually proves that it exists. There's no proof so that's one way, one path to find emptiness. The other path is just to simply get an inkling of emptiness and then try to absorb into that. So you can sort of describe in a way what emptiness is, and when you sort of get an idea of it, through meditation, you allow yourself to absorb into it and kind of let it percolate through every cell of your body until it becomes more of a solid knowing. Yeah? So it becomes like I know that. I know it like, I know the sun's going to rise tomorrow. So I'm certain of it. And I don't have to wait and prove it, I just know it in my bones. Just because I've seen it so many times or whatever. So you sort of get it to that sort of point. And we'll be doing a combination of both of those approaches. So sometimes we'll be doing a searching type of approach, and then other times we'll try and get an idea of it, and we'll just try to let it flow over us and try and deepen into that experience. Does that make sense? Now, one is obviously more intellectual than the other. One is like you take the object and then you try and search for it and you negate it. And one is more not intellectual, And so they kind of resonate to certain types of people. So very intellectual people like the kind of search and negate type of approach. whereas more, I don't know what the opposite word for intellectual, but more feeling type of people, and creative, intuitive is probably a good word. The more type of intuitive people maybe resonate to the sort of get a feeling and then go with that feeling deeper and deeper and deeper type. So we'll do a bit of both. So tomorrow morning we're going to do a very intellectual one, and then later in the day we do less, a more kind of search for one. Yep. So again, I'm repeating myself here, but I am going to do quite a number of techniques, and it's enough for you to just go with the one that resonates with you the most. You actually only need one of these techniques to land properly, and it will have the same effect whichever technique it is. So, you know, the objective is this weekend is to listen to them all, and you know, you might find one that lands this weekend, but in 6 months' time, a different one will be more effective. So it's good to cycle through these different techniques and other ones. These are, you know, there are more than just this, although these are kind of the main ones. So you might find other ones that land. Now, the other thing is, we'll be playing with a lot of these things intellectually. I say, right, now imagine an apple, okay? And how do you know an apple really exists, for example? Or I could say, you know, take these glasses. How do you know that these glasses really exist, for example? But really, the best way to often do this is particularly, we're in the moment with stuff that you're experiencing right now, particularly what we call dukkha. So again, I should explain these different Pali and Sanskrit terms as we go along, and the word dukkha I'll use quite a lot. And dukkha is anything that's not completely calm and completely happy. So if you're even the least bit away from completely calm and completely happy, then you're experiencing dukkha. So sometimes dukkha is translated as suffering, but suffering really has this idea of heavy suffering. But even just being really quite content, but just slightly restless, that's dukkha right there. That restlessness is dukkha. You know, or just think it's just not quite satisfactory. Even if you're 1% off of complete satisfaction, there's dukkha. Yeah? Nevertheless, of course, we're going to be trying to use this stuff on sometimes pretty heavy dukkha, like when, you know, things are, you know, you'll be trying to use it on really difficult situations. So we live in life and we have difficult situations arise. And in our meditation, usually it's the most pressing thing that is disturbing us in our meditation. We're not worried that the back lawn is a few millimeters too long and probably needs cutting within a week. It doesn't really faze us, you know. We could use emptiness on that, but we don't need to. So it has to be real for you, and for best results, it has to be used on situations where you are suffering and there's real problems.
What about pain? Like how?
Yep. You can use it on pain. Yep. So we'll go through that and just see if you can be more through this be more accepting of the pain, and in fact through this and through meditation one can completely tune out of pain. So yogis can not, in fact they can even feel pain as bliss. So that's how powerful this sort of stuff is. Alright, so let's talk about selfing. So I'm going to introduce you to a new word, which is selfing. I'm going to be asking you, are you selfing at the moment?
Selfie.
Are you selfing? Which means creating a self. Whenever we start to tell a story, you know what happened to me at the airport? I'm selfing. Yeah? I'm creating a mental cognition of a self. You know, I think it's not quite warm enough. It's basically as soon as you lose the I word, you're automatically selfing. Okay? And of course we say that, but and we're going to analyse throughout the weekend when we're selfing and when we're not selfing. And you'll find that selfing, far from going on all the time, sometimes ceases. Sometimes you won't be selfing. You won't be contemplating selfing. If you're completely admiring a beautiful sunset, then you're not actually thinking about yourself. You're just absorbed in the beauty of the sunset. But not only that, it's not an on or an off thing. Sometimes we'll be selfing a lot. Oh, you should have seen what happened to me. You should have seen what they said to me, and this is what I did. You make it really strong. You've got this really concretized, solid self. And other times it's a lot softer, you know. It's like I really just enjoyed the walk today. I was sort of so absorbed in the trees. It was a beautiful day. There's still selfing going on, but it's a floating type of, a lot more softer type of self. So it's a continuum. So selfing, not only decide are you selfing or not, but where on the continuum between no selfing and selfing are you on that continuum? So, yep. Story. For months now, I've been talking to my four diamonds.
With diamonds.
Four pillars.
No, diamond sounds nice.
Yeah, diamonds.
Happy with diamonds for that.
You're creating a story. Like, you don't go into the story, and I hope that you don't mind, but Deb is the queen of stories. She's absolutely the queen of stories here, and a lot of times, Deb is just going into a story again. And she tells it herself. She says, I know I'm going into a story. So she knows.
Still going to a story.
You're still going to a story. But stories is the epitome of this selfing. Yeah? Our story. And we build up this concretized, well, let me tell you about me. Well, it started when I was young and my parents didn't treat me the way I should, and from there it just got worse and worse and worse. And we create this whole backstory, and we can create a future story, and we can create a story around everything that we do. Little do we know, that is the cornerstone of all of your suffering. That is what is creating all of your problems. That is what's making you feel bad. And we think if we can create a happy story, if we can somehow manage to create a happy story, we'll feel happy. But you're barking up the wrong tree. It's not going to happen. It's never happened to anyone. There's always going to be problems. And even if you build yourself up into a prideful story, and I hate talking about Donald Trump, but he's the epitome of someone who's built himself up to be a great story, and yet he's one of the most miserable, horrible people that you can imagine. He's always abusing others, and he's always, it's not fair, they stole the election, they're hounding me, and I hate them, and he's just a horrible, nasty piece of work, and it's all because of this conflated story. It's just a story. And it's the same with, a lot of the other leaders, Putin and all of that, and the most humble people don't talk about themselves, and they're happy, and they're not interested in themselves. I don't have much of a story. I don't have much of it. They're not interested in their own story. They're just happy in the moment. Here, come and let me give you a bowl of my nice red soup, and that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in their own story. to them, it doesn't exist. Yeah, that's right. If they're enlightened, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, so if you're telling stories and that's negative, and then you can't solve it by turning it around to a happy story or
Well,
content.
Creates less suffering
yeah,
in the story.
yeah. So there is a place for stories. Like, I mean, we still have to, this is one of the ironies, is in the end, even when we become awakened, we still have to live in the world. And, you know, an awakened person will appear like a wise person, but they'll be no different, you know, to all of us, really, in a way. They'll still, you know, they'll still get headaches and they'll still have to go to the doctor and all of that. And they will still use stories. The Buddha used lots of stories, but he always used them as metaphors to try and help teaching. But deep down, even though he used stories, he understood them as just stories and that there was no inherent existence within the story. Yeah? So it's not to say that you'll stop using stories, but you can feel yourself when you start telling a story, you can feel yourself starting to get involved in the story. And that's dukkha. That's a contraction around an ego. Really, a story is an ego. An ego is a story. That's what an ego is. You know, who are you? Let me tell you know, an ego is who I am. And who am I? Well, let me tell you this story of who I am. It's a story. So an ego really is a story, and you get rid of your own personal story. You're not attached to it, but you still recognize the merits in using stories, occasionally, maybe a lot, to help other people move towards this point of awakening. Okay, so we identify with our story, and then we have to defend our story. Now, one of the things is once we've got a story, then we have to sort of defend it, and that's one of the things. And when someone attacks your story, you feel offended, and you feel like you need to defend it. You know? And if I see myself as a teacher, and you say, you know, you didn't really teach very well today, I would feel hurt, or I would have to defend it. But if I don't see myself as a teacher, I would say, sorry, I'm not a teacher. Why are you saying that? You know? So, if we don't have a story, we don't have an ego, there's no target for us to hit. And a massive release comes when we can let go. When we can finally let go of our story, it just feels like we have just left immense amounts of baggage. We've just let it go. And we just feel so free if you can let go of the story that you keep telling yourself and telling others. So sometimes people can't just let go of the story. Most of the times, you know, if someone comes to me in coaching and they say, well, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, I could say, just let go of the story. Okay, off you go. It's not going to work, is it? All right? So I don't even go there. So what I do is I try to adjust their sense of story. So I do things like reframing. I say, well, you could say that you were offended by this guy and this guy did this, which was a mean thing. But you could also say that the guy was perhaps battling with his own problems, and your ability to be compassionate to him is not only helping him, but it's helping you become a wiser person. And so they reframe their story from being an offended person to someone who's, I'm actually higher than that person because I'm being compassionate when other people would normally be blaming. And so there's a change of story. So in therapy, we change their story a lot, and we bring in new resources, and we bring in different things into their story, like love and acceptance and things like that into their story. So you can work with people to mould their stories so that they feel better about themselves. But in the end, the final cut, if you really want freedom, you have to cut stories altogether. And so that's the aim of this retreat, is to go beyond just transformation and go to transcendence instead of transformation. All right, so one of the things that we're going to do on this weekend, and maybe after this weekend, is you're going to notice whenever you say I. You notice as soon as the words I am come out of your mouth, that's the story. And one of the things that you can do is as soon as you hear that, change it from I am to am I.
Am I?
Yeah. So instead of saying, oh, I'm just going to make a cup of tea, ask yourself, am I going to make a cup of tea?
I guess I am.
Is it me that's going to make a cup of tea, or am I? Is the
You
cup
can
of
make
tea?
me a
Deb,
cup
you
of
can
tea.
Okay, but even just that small
Will
change,
you make
am
me a
I?
cup of tea? I quite like that.
So just that change. Would you like it? Yeah. You said I would like that. So as soon as you notice it, you can hear it in others. Okay. As soon as I hear I can actually challenge. We can challenge each other. You know, and that softens it. Just that changing it into am I instead of I am, or you know, are you, softens it puts it into awareness, puts it into a question. Yeah. All right. So that's one thing that we can do. A little thing that we can do just to sort of get us to start moving in this direction. And then the second thing, as I've already alluded to, is try to keep your awareness up through the weekend and notice that there's a flux in selfing. Okay? So be aware. Ask yourself, how much selfing am I doing at this point in time, at this moment? Was it more than an hour ago, or less than an hour ago, or less than 5 minutes ago? You know, where am I at between 0 and 100%? Where am I at?
What about if you're spending time on your own? You can't help. I mean, there's quality time and there's not, but yeah, if you fabricate, you can't help but going to stories. Are you saying to alleviate that? This is
it's exactly
of
the
course, yeah, it's exactly the same.
Whether with people, without people, you can always be going, how much selfing am I doing right now? So when you're on your own and you're concentrating on making a milkshake, and if you're sort of concentrating on the milkshake, there's not much selfing going on.
Yeah.
There's a little bit because you've got to be aware of the self of going and putting the banana in, but there's not much. There's no sort of story going on. Or if this banana milkshake doesn't turn out, I'm going to think of myself as a loser, and I've always been a loser when it comes to milkshakes. None of that's going on. You're just sort of making a milkshake. So same. Or you could be thinking of that, and in which case you're going, there's a lot of selfing going on. I'm really blaming myself around this milkshake issue. But you'll notice that throughout the day, it'll be whether you're on your own or on your own's better, because when you're with people, you tend to lose track of your mind much more easily. Yeah, and we sort of started by, having a good old chin wag when we got here, which is fine. But for the rest of the weekend, maybe just take that little bit of a back seat and notice your tendency to want to get into conversations and want to start telling each other about, let me tell you what happened to me at such and such. And it feels kind of good, but if you want to believe in this stuff, and I'm not pushing you to, but if you believe in this stuff, that pull and into that ego is what is creating suffering. So pause it there. Can you just grab the Trudy or someone? Yeah.
I won't have anything to do or talk about.
That's right. Well, that'll be